Today is Tuesday in Holy Week, the week we remember the last hours and days of Jesus' life. The prayer book gives us Mark 11:15 to 19 as our gospel passage for today. It's the story of Jesus' cleansing of the temple. Jesus has come into Jerusalem for this last week of his life. It's the week of the Passover, the yearly festival when Jewish people from all over Israel come to the temple to celebrate the Passover. The common people from the towns and villages come, the farmers, the peasants, the poor people. They want to be there for the Passover and they want to make their sacrifice in the temple. Something every person in Israel wants to do every year. Jesus comes into the temple and he looks around and he sees that it's become a marketplace. There are money changers there. They have tables filled with coins that are stacked up in piles. And they take the common ordinary money that the people bring and they change it into the Jewish money. That's the only money that can be used for a sacrifice in the temple. And every time they make an exchange, they skim a little off for themselves. And then they take their profits and they pay some back to the priests who allow them to have their table in the temple. And Jesus sees the sellers of the turtle doves and the pigeons. The poorest people could only afford a bird to sacrifice for the temple, and so the sellers of pigeons and turtle doves would allow them to buy their birds. And every time they would skim a little extra profit for themselves also. And they also would pay back a little bit to the priests as a kickback for having their table there. And there were other people selling food and souvenirs and trinkets. The place was filled with booths and tables. It had become a literal marketplace there in the courtyard of the temple. Jesus looked around and he went to the nearest table of the money changer and he turned it over. The coins went flying through the air, rolling across the ground. The money changer went scrambling after his money and yelling at Jesus. Jesus went to the next table. He flipped it over, same thing. All the tables of the money changers, he just flipped them over and the money was flying everywhere. People were yelling and screaming, "What's going on?" Then Jesus went to the sellers of the turtle doves. He knocked over their chairs and he opened the cages, and the pigeons and the turtle doves went flying through the air, their wings fluttering overhead of everyone. Jesus drove everyone out, all the buyers and sellers. He drove them out of the temple. And he spoke to the people, and he quoted two prophets. He quoted the prophet Isaiah and the prophet Jeremiah. Isaiah said, "God says, my house shall be called a house of prayer for all people." And Jeremiah said, "You have made God's house a den of robbers." And by quoting the prophets, Jesus was putting himself in the place of a prophet. He was speaking up for the little people, for the common people. A prophet is an outsider who speaks the word of God to the establishment. That's what Jesus was doing in this case. He was speaking up for the common, ordinary person against the establishment. It's difficult to be a prophet. For one thing, you have to know what the word of God is. You have to discern the word of God and separate it out from your own word. You have to know the difference between your will and God's will. There are a lot of false prophets out there, even now. And the second thing that's hard about being a prophet is that you may have to pay a price. You have to be ready to pay a price if you're going to speak as a prophet. Look at Martin Luther King Jr. or Mahatma Gandhi. or Jesus himself. So Jesus acts as a prophet in this passage, and he reminds us of our calling to be prophets also and to take prophetic action. I think that the prophets in the world today are probably our public health officials. They're having to speak some very difficult words to us that we need to hear that aren't very popular, but they're doing it. Dr. Fauci, Dr. Birx. Another prophet, I think, is Captain Crozier of the USS Theodore Roosevelt. He may have sacrificed his career in order to save the lives of some of his crew by speaking truth to power. It's not easy to be a prophet, but there are times when we are called to speak prophetically. So today we remember that Jesus came into the temple, into Jerusalem, as a prophet. He spoke truth to power, and he paid the price willingly. Thank you.